It's all about. I'm very glad to be here this evening to talk about same-day voter registration, which is an issue that I'm somewhat familiar with, at least for 3 decades. But before I say anything, there's so many people in here I know I would recognize if I had the time, but I do want to recognize one more time a new leader. Not rising leader, a new leader on the scene, kind of leadership we need for the 21st century, Assata Mann. Give her a big hand. I have known Assata since 2017? 2018. I met Assata for the first time. She was a student leader at Rutgers University in Newark. And we wanted to bring Dr. Cornel West to speak at Rutgers University. And we were coming to Rutgers because, you know, sometimes, I don't understand, we're in the 21st century, but Cornel West was too radical for some people. And we couldn't get a venue. We couldn't get a place. And then I went to a friend at Rutgers who worked for the university, and they said, well, in order for you to bring Cornel West to Rutgers, there must be a student organization willing to co-sponsor. And that was advantageous because then a number of the university fees could be waived, you know, and it wouldn't be as expensive. And I met a young student leader there. Her name was Assata Mann, and it was go from the beginning. And we got Cornel West at Rutgers University. I'm also here tonight with another leader from the Trenton community. And she is a progressive, a radical. She had run for office 4 years ago just to get her feet wet, ran again, did twice as well, ran for, I believe, the North Ward City Council, West Ward City Council seat in Trenton, New Jersey. She didn't win, but she came in a close second, and I believe that she will have a future in Trenton politics. Natalia Armstrong, give her a big hand. I have been fortunate throughout my life, and this really doesn't have a lot to do with same-day registration, although it does that and more. I've been fortunate in my life to be in contact with and take leadership from women in our community, in our movement, in politics. Almost from the beginning, I've been involved in the movement for 52, it'll be 52 years on March the 24th. That's when I started as a high school student activist. I led my first act of civil disobedience at the age of 17. I was the president of student government at Arts High School. And you know, y'all wouldn't have known me 51 years ago. I was like, y'all remember Archie comics? I was like the Black Archie. You know, I was like, you know, I had the sweater, I had the varsity letter, I was the president of student government, captain of track team, all of that stuff. And it was fun until there was a teacher strike in Newark, and we had missed so many days of school that they told us we weren't going to graduate. You know, the law was if you missed 35 consecutive days of school, you're not supposed to be passed on to the next grade, you're not supposed to graduate. And you know, as a student government president of Arts High, it was like the Halloween party and the UNICEF collection, and everything was fun. And then all of a sudden, when the senior class wasn't going to graduate, everybody turned, Larry, what are you going to do about this? you know, and so I led a walkout at my high school on March the 24th, 1971. It was the third period. We were supposed to meet outside at 10:43, the end of third period. I'm outside, 10:45, nobody. 10:47, tears coming out my eyes. Because my principal told me, she said, Larry, if you take these students out of school, you're going to be expelled. You're not going to graduate. You're not going to go to college. But we couldn't call it back. But then 10:50, the doors swang open, and 90% of the students at RTI walked out. We walked out. We marched downtown Newark. How many know where Penn Station is? There's a hotel across the street from Penn Station. Today it's called the Doubletree Hotel. It was called the Gateway Hotel then. And 200 of us got into the Gateway Hotel, and we sat in, and the mayor came, and he said if we would leave, if we wouldn't get arrested, because you know Newark had an uprising just 4 years before that. So all the police in Newark were there, all the fire, you know, mayor said, if you guys leave, I'll make sure your demands are met. And then 2 months after that, in June, just before I graduated, the mayor of Newark asked me if I would be willing to be a member of the Newark Board of Education. And on July 1st, 1971, I became the youngest fully voting board member in the history of the United States. And that was the result. That was the result of movement building. It wasn't because I had a particular magic. I mean, maybe I had some leadership characteristics at the time, but it was a movement, and they realized that the students had power. Went on to eventually go to Princeton University, not far from here. I majored in protesting at Princeton. And I organized the People's Front for the Liberation of Southern Africa. And we picketed Nassau Hall for 66 consecutive days. And then on April 11th, 1978, 210 of us got into Nassau Hall. We took over Nassau Hall. We demanded that Princeton divest itself of funds from corporations that were doing business with the racist apartheid regime. And as a result of that sit-in, Princeton did divest from a number of corporations. It was a successful movement. Then I left Princeton and returned to Newark. In 1982, we organized the People's Organization for Progress. And I'm proud to say that after 41 years, the People's Organization for Progress is still going strong. And we're here today. But it was in 1984 when Jesse Jackson ran for president. And how many of you remember the first Jackson campaign of 1984? And we organized a group out of POP. We organized a broader group called the Friends of Jesse Jackson. And it was in 1984, when Jesse Jackson ran for president, that I first heard about the idea of same-day voter registration. And I believe they had put into effect same-day voter registration, I believe in Minnesota. How many remember Paul Wellstone, Senator Paul Wellstone? Senator Paul Wellstone, whatever the state was he was from, I think it was Minnesota. Yes. It was Minnesota. Senator Paul Wellstone was proposing, I think he had put in a bill that would have made same-day registration national. And I actually called Paul Wellstone and got to speak with him briefly about this same-day voter registration. But I had learned about it from Jesse Jackson because it was part of his platform. And, you know, same-day registration made sense to me. You know, why is it that if you're not registered, you can't go into a polling place where all the voter registration information is and register right there and cast your vote? It makes sense, right? Why should people be excluded from voting for some bureaucratic deadline. I mean, it's not like we're in the 19th century and we don't have the technology available that would make it simple, make it fast, make it efficient, make it official. We had, I mean, in the 80s, we had all the technology necessary to make same-day registration a reality, not only in New Jersey, but throughout the nation. And as a younger man, you know, I couldn't understand why there would be opposition to same-day registration. We grew up in school, we went to school, we learned about democracy, how important the vote was. Why wouldn't we want to do something that would make it easy for as many people as possible to register and vote? And the answer was, I found out in time that it didn't exist because there were people who didn't want that to happen. And they didn't want it to happen because they didn't want to expand the electorate. In fact, there are some people who would rather have only a quarter of the eligible voters in the country voting rather than 100% of the people in this country voting. And that's what we want. We want 100% of the people who are eligible to register and vote. See, I couldn't understand it. You know, I hadn't yet become like, my mind wasn't yet in the direction of the third party. I was a Democrat. I thought the Democrats, you know, were for the people, you know, wanted all the things that we wanted. But I discovered very quickly that there were people on both sides of the aisle that didn't want same-day registration. And that was in 1984. It was in Jesse Jackson's platform in 1984. It was in his platform again in 1988. And in 1988, I was the co-chair of the Jackson campaign in New Jersey with Sharpe James. Sharpe James was the chairperson of the campaign. I was the co-chairperson of the Jesse Jackson campaign. And in 1988, I was a Democratic Party delegate to the Democratic Party convention in Atlanta, Georgia. And I went down there and, you know, stood on, maybe some of you saw the picture because I understand the picture with Nationwide. You know, Larry, he just can't be, he always got to be extra everywhere he goes, right? It wasn't enough to sit with the Jackson delegation. I had to stand up on the chair with Jesse Jackson sign, you know, for everybody to see. And that picture was in the Atlanta Constitution Journal and in a number of other papers across the country. But it was in the Jackson platforms of 1984 and 1988. Jesse didn't get the nomination. He came close, but I'm going to tell you this. Regardless of what you may say about Jesse Jackson, there would not have been a President Barack Obama if there had not been a Jesse Jackson running for president in 1984 and 1988. Because it was the Jackson rule, as it became known, that proportional representation of delegates was brought into the National Democratic Convention. Because before the Jackson campaign of 1988, it was winner take all. And it was Jesse Jackson that demanded, if I get 40% of the vote, I should get 40% of the delegates. But the Jackson campaign ended. But out of that campaign, we formed a statewide, in fact, New Jersey had the first chartered chapter of the National Rainbow Coalition. And we continue the fight for same-day registration. At that time, the Speaker of the General Assembly of New Jersey was a fellow named Alan Karcher. Do any of you remember Assemblyman Alan Karcher? Well, Alan Karcher was the only white assembly person to endorse Jesse Jackson, to publicly endorse Jesse Jackson. Alan Karcher was very progressive. And Alan Karcher was an active member of the New Jersey Rainbow Coalition. And we wanted to continue the fight for same-day registration. Karcher was from Sayreville. His law firm was in Sayreville. So it was Alan Karcher representing the New Jersey Rainbow Coalition. We went into state court to argue for same-day registration. That's right. I know none of you heard about it, but if you go back, I don't know what they have now. You know, you got this now, you got the cell phone, but in my day, it was microfiche and microfilm. You go back in the microfiche and the microfilm, you might be able to find the articles from back then. But we went into court to fight for same-day registration. And at that time in New Jersey, there was a 30-day cutoff. How many of y'all old enough to remember the 30-day cutoff? That means 30 days before. If you didn't register 30 days before the election, that was it. You'd have to wait until you could register, but you couldn't vote in that upcoming election. You had to wait until the next election. So we went into court, Karcher representing us, we went into court to argue that the 30-day cutoff was in fact a violation of our constitutional rights, that we should be able to freely and fairly exercise those rights, regardless. And we didn't win the case, but the judge said the 30-day cutoff was arbitrary and unfair. And he said that it should be moved from 30 days to 21 days. We have a 21-day cutoff today in New Jersey because of that court case that Alan Karcher argued for us. But that was a organization of this event and all these organizations, and all of you are here today still fighting for same-day registration. And let's unite and fight until same-day registration is a reality in the state of New Jersey. But we argue for same-day registration not just because it's a bureaucratic inconvenience. We argue for same-day registration because it's an expansion of democracy. It's really about democracy. And brothers and sisters, I'm sure that I don't have to tell y'all that democracy is in trouble in this country. Now, this language might sound harsh to some, but don't invite me unless you really want to hear what I have to say. You know, I'm 69 now, I'm a senior citizen, I'm liable to say anything. Got my pension, got my Social Security, I'm a runaway slave. They can't control me anymore. Fascism is on the rise in the United States. And if there was a telegraphic way to understand the complex idea of fascism, it's simply this: that fascism is anti-democracy. Fascism is dictatorship. And at first, you know, people were scared to say fascism. They would say neo-fascism. And then the ones that were scared to say neo-fascism would say authoritarianism. But to me, it's fascism. When they're burning books, that's fascism. I don't know what you, that's fascism. That's what they did in Germany. They're burning books. When they're trying to take people's right to vote away 440 bills introduced in 49 states, that's fascism. When they're trying to take away our right to study black history, like DeSantis down there in Florida, that's fascism. And they're not going to take away my history, my right to vote without a fight. I will fight them for every inch of political freedom that we require as citizens in this country. This thing is serious, y'all. what time it is? That they are launching violent attacks on synagogues, on mosques, on churches, on department stores. That openly armed groups are marching in our streets, attacking elected officials. And on January 6th, if it wasn't clear, if you wanted to quibble about whether it was authoritarianism or neo-fascism or whatever, it became clear as to what it was on January the 6th when they stormed the Capitol of the United States. They stormed the Capitol to overturn a democratic election, an attempt to try to put into place fake electors, an attempt to interrupt Congress' approval of the vote of the Electoral College. They wanted, did you hear any of this stuff? That Flynn told Trump, you should seize the voting machines. Am I making this up? Somebody tell me now, because I don't want to be accused of hyperbole. Did not Flynn tell Trump to seize the voting machines, to declare a state of emergency, and to remain in office until they decide to do whatever? That was the plan. That's fascism. They want to bring a fascist state to this country. They're rolling back everybody. You know, you knew that when they introduced all these voting rights bills, that was against black people. They're trying to take away women's reproductive rights. They're trying to take away workers' rights. They're trying to take away black people's voting rights. No, it is time for action. It is time to not constrict democracy, but to expand democracy. Now, I know we have a problem in Washington. Why can't we get the George Floyd Police Accountability Act passed? The Republicans. Why can't we get the John Lewis Voting Rights Act passed? The Republicans. But what is the issue in New Jersey? We have a Democratic governor. We have a Democratic majority in the Senate. We have a Democratic assembly. With all these Democratic controls, all these Democrats in control, they need to bring same-day registration to the floor, pass it, and make it the law of New Jersey. To me, it's scandalous. I don't know about how you feel. Black people gave 94% of their vote to the election of Governor Murphy. Mm-hmm. And we should have. The other guy was with the fascist party. You know, I don't care if he was a moderate fascist, you know, or radical fascist. They understand the concept of the team. It's us. We got to get together and understand the concept of the team. All of us that are on the same team, we need to play like we're on the same team and beat these fascists back to where they belong. And I'm telling you, we have to get this bill passed. The bill is A 1996 S24 247. Did I get it right? Close. Whatever the bill number is. Whatever it is. Let's get that bill passed. Assad is going to go into the details, but let me just say two things before we close up. One, let's do everything we can to get these bills passed. But number two, this attack on black studies is very serious, on black history. Do you know they've introduced 500 bills? Now they say CRT, but you know, and I know what that is. It's black history. Youngkin in Virginia took Martin Luther King out of the elementary school curriculum. Did you know that? Yes. They don't even want Dr. King. Right now, teachers have had to cover books up or remove books from their classroom about black history written by black and white people. So on the 25th of February, we're going to protest against the ban on black history in Newark. We're going to meet 11 a.m. at the Lincoln statue in Newark, New Jersey to march. I never thought, I thought that fight was over in the 60s. We were fighting for black studies on college campuses, in schools. In fact, some of us began to take black studies for granted. Sometimes bad things happen so we can learn to appreciate what we have. So we're going to be marching for black history. And I invite everyone in this room, because I'm going to tell you, white children need black history as much as black children need black history. All our children need black history. So I invite all of you to march with us on Saturday, February 25th, 11 o'clock a.m., Lincoln Statue, 12 Springfield Avenue in Newark, New Jersey. And let's win this fight and make same-day registration the law of the land. Thank you very much. Power to the people.